Hello there, people of YouTube, it is WiiLord95 here, and today I'm going to be analyzing Ace's Coconut Mall run. So he finished with a time of 155.793, and he used Funky Kong and the Fling Runner. So, before analyzing it, we will watch the run through, and from what I can recall, this run is pretty clean overall, very minimal mistakes. And this run is notable for a couple reasons. It's one of my favorite world records of 2018, and it's definitely one of the most optimized. And yeah, this is the first run to beat the car lap 3, so you'll see what that means if you've never seen this before later on. And like I said, overall pretty consistent. The tech was all executed pretty well. Good low tricks, lines were pretty good, and yeah, still currently the world record. It's a 38.515 lap 1. Pretty good lap. I think the BKS, or best known split, is low 0.4, so obviously a little bit improvable, but not by too much. This lap 2, I think, is the strongest lap in the world record. It was 38.6 something, which is pretty close to BKS. I think the BKS is a high 0.5. Just overall pretty clean lap. And the reason why this lap is slower than lap 1 is because he does not get to take the 3 boost panel strat because the car's in the way. And also he has to wait a little bit longer before he can do the last mini turbo, because the other car's in the way, so that's why lap 2 is slower. Lap 3, although still pretty clean, is objectively the sloppiest. Obviously, he was probably a little bit nervous going into lap 3 because he was on pretty fast pace. And you can see he beats the car and finishes. So let's see, lap 2 was a 6.63 and lap 3 was a 6.15. I think the best known split for lap 3 is also like a mid or low 0.4. So I got this video from CTGP Records, which is a YouTube channel that uploads world records and custom track best known times. And yeah, so let's get into the analysis. So he gets the full start boost, which is of course very important. And noticeably he waits a little bit before he wheelies. And this is because if he wheelies as soon as he's actionable, he would have to do a chain right before doing the low trick up by the curb, or not curb, the escalator rail. So normally you want to wait until this kind of break in the shadow. So not this light part, not the shadow here, but right here in the little break in the shadow. So you can see he does that, and then he wheelie turns a little bit to the right, so that way he can align himself better for the rail. And over here he notices that his alignment's a little bit off, and he knows that this part on the stairs will give him air time. So he wheelie turns in the air, which doesn't lose any time, and fixes his angle. So goodbye Ace. Here he hops to cancel his wheelie, which makes the low trick a little bit easier. I don't believe it's necessary to cancel the wheelie, but he does, and a lot of people do, so I assume it's because it's easier and it doesn't lose a lot of time. Here he gets his wheelie out pretty fast, so he gets minimal air time. Loses a little bit because he lands a little bit late. Ideally he would land on this little gray thing at the end of the escalator where it says coconut. I actually never noticed that it says coconut. Here he hops, and then he does a delayed drift, so that basically means you wait until, or you hop and then you wait until just before you land, and then you start drifting. This allows you to charge mini turbos faster. So that's pretty cool. He uses his mushroom here, taking the shortcut pretty well. It's important that when you're taking the shortcut, you back up a little bit. You want to hug this, so you want to get as close to this wall as possible. And then about here, you want to start holding left. So this gives you a more perpendicular or no, not perpendicular. It gives you a more parallel angle for the next part. So he releases his mini turbo and wheelie turns to the side, which does not lose any time because he's in a boost. And then let's go the analog stick and hops and tricks late. So what this does a couple things. First of all, this gives you lower air because you hopped. Second of all, it gives you a little bit more control over where you land because you're not still in a wheelie. And thirdly, it sets you up pretty nicely for what comes next. So he nosedives and then he leans back, which is just interesting. The nosedive is to decrease the air time, and then the leaning back is that way he lands on his back tire. Sticks the landing quite nicely. Now what he does over here is he wants to trick off this side of the rail, the right side. So what he does is he lands, and then immediately after he lands, he starts turning to the right. Fun little fact about Mario Kart that most people don't know is bounces on landings, like bad landings, are caused when you start turning before you land. So if you make sure that you only start turning after you land, you should almost never bounce. So does that, and then he wheelies and wheelie turns during the boost, again not losing any time. So this strat would actually be pretty easy, except this little corner here makes it a lot harder. Just that little tiny corner. Anyway, cancels his wheelie here and hops, and this just gives him minimal air. Does an up trick. I don't think the trick matters here, except I believe if you get a side trick, it's much harder. So try not to side trick if you can help it. So he lands here, and then he holds left and wheelies. So what this does is it makes it so that way you don't hit this wall up here. Okay, so he starts drifting right before he lands, and the reason why he waits so long is that way he has maximum wheelie time. And the reason why he starts drifting before he lands is because he gets what's called a slip drift. A slip drift essentially means that you start drifting in the air, or you have a drift with no hop. And the reason why this is good is because if you're hopping, then that's more airtime, so more airtime is bad in this game. So starts this turn kind of wide because he gets a bounce when he leaves when he's leaving this tiled floor, but finishes the turn quite nicely. As you can see right here, he's really close to the wall, so really good turn. And he releases his mini turbo in a way that'll make him straight, like going straight, not to the side, because you don't want to go for this boost panel. You want to go for the fountain trick, at least if you're on world record pace. Now what he does here is he drifts to the right, and at the same time he does a right trick, so that's a side trick using the right side of the D-pad, which is much easier if you're using a classic controller or GameCube controller. With Wiimote and Nunchuck, it's actually a lot harder, which is why you notice a lot of the top players on this track use classic controller or GameCube controller. Now it is possible with Wiimote and Nunchuck and also with WiiWheel, I guess, but it's a lot more inconsistent, so just a little fun fact. Pretty good, minimal airtime, and drifts to the left to align himself for the next planter trick. Now this is probably, I mean, it's good, but he does a better lap 2 and 3, so you'll see. The trick just looks faster, looks cooler. I don't know if it's actually slower to get this kind of slower trick, but yeah, I'd have to ask somebody about that. Anyway, moves on to the next turn, and he realizes he's a little bit more to the right than he probably wants to be. Usually you want to be like right over here, about a bike length to the, or bike width rather, to the left, which does make a pretty big difference. And then he hops to the left and he starts drifting at the same time. Now, getting a mini turbo out fast on this turn isn't really that important because the turn is so long. So you can see he charges his mini turbo back here, but he still has to hold it till the end. This is probably, I don't personally think it's the hardest turn, but I think this is probably the turn that Ace struggles with the most. As you can see, he got a lot of space there. But anyway, releases the mini turbo without a bounce, which is pretty good, because bounces is more airtime and airtime is bad. And he gets pretty good alignment for the bottom route, and you always want to take the bottom route because it's just faster. Because you get less airtime and you don't have to take this wide turn, and you don't have to there's a lot of reasons why I won't get into it, but always take the bottom route. It's just faster. And he wheelie turns in the boost here, and what that does is it makes it that way he doesn't hit this blue wall. So over here what he does is another delayed drift, and he takes this turn pretty tight. Good turn. And again, he gets this straight angle, and gets one of these fast low tricks, so just watch that again because they look super cool. Nice. Over here he does an up trick. I personally don't agree with this up trick. I'm pretty sure a down trick is fastest, and also a side trick is, I believe Rio made a video about that. I'll link that in the description down below next to the CTGP Records channel. And I'm pretty sure up trick is the slowest trick. Now, I wouldn't normally complain about this, except Ace has shown throughout the run that he's very capable of choosing which trick that he'd like to do, judging by all of the side trick planter tricks. So if he were to come back, I would really hope that he does a down trick here, because it's faster. At least I'm like pretty sure. If it's not faster, then just my bad, but I'm like 90% sure that a down trick is fastest. So over here he does a slight nudge to the left, again while in the boost, so not losing time to get a better angle. And here he does a hard soft drift, or not hard soft drift, just a soft drift. And this basically just puts him at an angle where you can do the 3 boost panel strat. So for the longest time, the community kind of thought that skipping this first boost panel was faster, and that's because it is, unless you take it like really well. So if you're not like at a world record level, or if you're not at like, say like mid 157 pace, probably isn't worth going for this, mostly because this car is in the way. But yeah, the 3 boost panel strat actually saves about 0.1 if you do it well. So here he does pretty well. Avoids that car nicely, and does a drift on the final turn. Now, he takes it pretty tight, but I'm pretty sure he releases it while he's still in the shroom boost. So, let's see. Still in the boost, mini turbo charges. Yeah, it looks like he could have waited a tiny bit longer, so that would have saved a tiny bit more time. But overall, pretty solid lap, 5:15. I think the BKS is a low 0.4. I'm not going to look it up, but yeah. So a little bit improvable, but pretty nice. Here he gets a full chain, which basically means he wheelies the frame after the previous one ends, and this actually saves a lot more time than it probably should over waiting longer, because each frame you wait before you wheelie again, you lose time. So it's pretty significant, especially at high level. But yeah, so he gets the frame perfect chain wheelie. So here he realizes that these stairs are going to give him air, so he wheelie turns to the right, which doesn't lose any time because he's in the air. And yeah, so he cancels his wheelie here with a hop, and so that way he can hop again and do this trick. Again, getting a little bit too much air, but better than lap 1, and it's pretty inconsistent, so it's not like something that you expect of anybody. Pretty good angle going into the shroom, hugs the wall nicely. Gets a pretty good angle for this. Lands a little bit more to the side than he probably wanted to, but That's pretty negligible. So takes that pretty nicely. Did he drift here? Hold on 1 second. Just gonna check something real quick. Is he drifting? No, he just turns. Some people like to drift, some people like to turn. I don't remember exactly what's faster, but again, avoids that wall. Now he starts this turn better than lap 1, but at the end, I mean, still really good turn. This is just me being nitpicky, but at the end, he's a little bit wider than he was lap 1, so still really good turn though. Over here, oh, I didn't even realize. So he gets a good first planter trick. Good job. And over here, he wheelie turns a little bit, which loses very little time because he's about to do a trick, but does still lose some time, so there's a little bit more time saved. And he gets faster low trick. So if you compare this one to, I think it was at like 31 seconds. Yeah. It's noticeably faster. So again, I don't know if that actually, oh, that's too far. I don't know if this actually saves more time than lap 1, but it certainly looks nicer, so that's pretty good. Over here, he is at the perfect angle to enter this turn. Last lap, he was right over here, so better angle for this turn, as you can see. Takes it tighter, and he finishes the turn with not the best angle, so that means he has to spin drift here, so that way he can get his angle back. Again, not really losing time because he's in a shrimp boost, or not a shrimp boost, boost panel. So over here he does another delayed drift, and wheelie turns again. Wow, okay. So he wheelie turns again to give him a better alignment, because if you're too far left, then it just doesn't work. The low trick just doesn't work. So pretty good ending. Again, the up trick that I don't agree with. And he starts this wider. Remember lap 1, he was like right over here, really close to this little pattern. But lap 2, he cannot take the 3 boost panel strategy because the car's in the way. So he starts a little bit wider and does delayed drift, and see, car's in the way, and aligns himself very well for this boost panel. Now he waits to hop until after he gets the boost, because if you hop onto the boost panel, then those are more frames that you're in the air without a boost. So he waits until he gets the boost, and then he hops to the side, which loses the least amount of time. And then he drifts back to avoid that car, and he has to start his drift later, like I mentioned before, because the car's in the way, which means all of these frames right here, he is not in a boost and he's drifting, so he's at 84 instead of 117. So he finishes his mini turbo a little bit later. Pretty solid lap though, 0.6, high points, or like mid-high 0.6. Over here he gets a half chain, which basically means he wheelie 2 frames after the previous one ended. Oh, yeah, I haven't noticed that before. So he actually wheelie turns here. A lot of little nudges in this run. Like right here. If you look very carefully, you can see... Oh, just past it. It's only for like 1 frame. Wow, look. Right here. He's turning a tiny little bit. As you can see, he loses a little bit of time. And then... yeah, so... it's a pretty good angle going into this. Again, half chain. And it's a little bit harder to chain lap 3 because you're on the stairs. And if you're unlucky, then you get a bounce, and then you can't start your wheelie until you land, and you actually lose a lot of time. So this is really good that he got this wheelie here. If he did not, then he probably would not have beat the car lap 3 and probably would not have subbed. So this is probably the most important part of the run right here, that he gets this chain before he lands. And again, he cancels his wheelie, but he can't do the low trick this time because the escalator's going the opposite direction, so he does this strategy, which he did previously on the second escalator for the same reason. So, interesting thing here, he realizes that his angle is going to be way too wide, so he leans back a little bit. And what this does is it makes it so that way the bike is angled more towards the right as opposed to more this way. And he's still a little bit wider than he probably meant to be, and a little bit wider than optimal, but he makes it work with a pretty good shroom, and hops again. So sometimes it's a little bit helpful to aim for this horizontal wall, this little green, little green grass part, and yeah, so he does that here. This is probably the part of the run that loses the most time, and it's kind of unfortunate because there's not really much you can do about it. The angle that he gets into the escalator does have an effect on where he will bounce, but again, it's pretty random. There's no real consistent way. So in a previous run, he did low trick off this like he did on lap 1 and 2 at the first escalator, but when comparing it, it didn't really save anything, so he doesn't do that here. And ideally you want to bounce pretty early, because then you can land on the ending part, the part that says coconut. So yeah, that's ideal, but he doesn't. So he bounces a little bit later, and then he bounces again, which gives him a lot of airtime and sends him pretty wide entering this turn. So that's pretty unfortunate. But finishes the turn pretty nicely, given the bounce that he got. And then he gets a good planter trick here. Did he really turn again? Yeah, he did, very, very slightly. The finish of this run is very strong. So, except for this turn is wide, but it's lap 3, he's nervous, he gets past. Over here, perfect angle going into the next turn. So here he gets what's called a wheelie trigger, and I believe... Actually, I don't want to say anything, because I don't know exactly what causes this, but I did notice that he is more to the left than previous laps. This looks pretty cool. Doesn't save any time, doesn't lose any time, but it just looks pretty cool. And then, again, he does this up trick here. So I noticed that he delays his wheelie a little bit here, probably just because he's nervous and he missed the button or something, or I don't know. I remember reading that he got really scared when he got this wheelie trigger, because it's a different animation, and usually when you get different animations, that's bad. So he was probably a little bit surprised, but muscle memory kicked in. Good wheelie. Notice how he's closer this time, as opposed to being over here like he was on lap 2. And he soft drifts again, and does the 3 boost panel strat, beating the car. See, beating the car with quite a bit of wiggle room, actually. Let's see. Yeah, he had a pretty wide margin. I think if he was about 0.03 slower, then he still would have made it. So, I mean, it's nice that he was faster, but he probably didn't have to be this fast. And last turn is wide, just because he doesn't want to fail the run on the last turn, because it's almost certainly going to be the sub. And make sure he gets the mini turbo, and finishes with a pretty solid angle. Normally, you want to be as straight as possible. So you can see he's a little bit to the right, and it's probably only lost like a frame, but ideally you want to be as perpendicular to the finish line as possible. And that's about it. Lap 3 was low 0.6, so pretty solid. If you enjoyed, be sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. If you are new, support is always appreciated. If you have a run that you would like me to analyze next, be sure to let me know. And without further ado, thank you all for watching, and have a good day.